I'd been on the road for 10 hours. 10 hours of winding highways, gas station, coffee, and that quiet hum of anticipation you feel when you're carrying something precious. In the passenger seat, wrapped in a soft quilt, sat a wooden box, its edges worn smooth by time. Inside were my grandmother's books, first editions, leather-bound, their pages yellowed but heavy with her handwritten notes. Her journals, too, filled with stories of grit and grace from the 1930s. I was bringing them to my daughter, Amelia, for her wedding rehearsal dinner. A gift. A piece of our family's heart. Something to carry into her new life. The drive from Virginia to Maryland wasn't easy at my age 62. With a back that protests long hours and eyes that tire under the glare of headlights. But I didn't mind. This was for Amelia, my girl, the one who used to curl up in my lap, her small hands tracing the words in those journals, begging me to tell her about her great-grandmother, Rose, who wrote through dust storms and hard winters. I hadn't seen Amelia in months. Our calls had grown short, her voice clipped, distracted. But I trusted her. I trusted my daughter. When I pulled into the driveway, the house glowed under a soft evening sky. It was bigger than I'd pictured, all clean lines and glass, not like the cozy home we'd shared when she was little. I grabbed the box, its weight steady in my arms, and walked to the door. Lucas, her fiancé, answered. His smile was polite but thin, like he was greeting a stranger. "Dottie," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Didn't expect you." I held up the box, my voice bright despite the long drive. "I brought something for the rehearsal dinner for Amelia." He blinked, then tilted his head. "Duh! Dinner was yesterday." The words landed like a stone in my chest. I stood there, frozen, the box suddenly heavier. "What do you mean, yesterday?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Lucas shrugged. "Her family was in town. It was last minute. We figured you wouldn't want to make the trip." Her family, the phrase stung. I was her mother. I'd driven 10 hours. I opened my mouth to ask for Amelia, but she appeared behind him, her face soft but distant. "Mom," she said, "I didn't think you'd come all this way." No hug, no apology. Just that. I asked if I could come in just for a moment. Lucas glanced at Amelia. She hesitated, then said, "It's a bit chaotic right now. Maybe another time." The door closed softly, but it might as well have slammed. I sat in my car for a long time, the box beside me like a silent witness. Laughter drifted from the house glasses clinking, voices warm. None of them mine. I kept thinking of Amelia at 8, her eyes wide as she held those journals, calling them treasure. I'd told her they were history. Maybe they were both. Now they were just mine again. I drove to a motel nearby, the kind with faded curtains. And a flickering sign. In the dim room, I set the box on the bed and opened it. The book smelled of old paper and ink, Rose's careful handwriting spilling across the margins. I traced a line with my finger. We keep going even when the world forgets us. My throat tightened. I'd driven 10 hours to give my daughter a piece of myself. And she'd left me standing outside her door. That night, as I lay in the dark, something shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet ache, like a bruise forming under the skin. I thought of Rose, writing through loss, through betrayal, through years when no one listened. Maybe this box wasn't meant to stay with Amelia. Maybe it was meant for something bigger. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, Clara Hood, known me since my teaching days. "Dottie heard something about your property in Shenandoah. Might want to check your papers. Something's not right." I stared at the screen, my heart suddenly loud in my chest. The box sat open on the bed, Rose's words staring back at me. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of something I hadn't named yet. Something that wasn't just hurt. Something that felt like waking up. The motel room smelled of stale coffee and damp carpet, but I didn't care. The wooden box sat open on the bed, its contents spilling soft light under the cheap lamp. I picked up one of Rose's journals, its leather cover soft as memory. My grandmother's words stared back at me, written in that careful, slanted script she used when the world was too heavy. If we keep going, she'd written, because our stories don't end when others stop listening. I read it again, slower, letting each word sink in. My chest ached not from the drive, not from the 10 hours on the road, but from something deeper. Something I hadn't let myself feel until now. I thought about Amelia, my girl who used to climb into my lap with those same journals, her small fingers tracing Rose's words while I told her stories of a woman who raised 3 kids alone in a world that didn't care. Amelia would beg for just one more, her eyes bright, her laughter filling our old house in Virginia. That was years ago. When had it changed? When had her voice on the phone turned, rushed, clipped, like she was checking a box? When had Lucas started answering for her, his words sharp and quick, cutting our calls short. I couldn't pinpoint the moment, but sitting there alone in that motel room, I felt it. The distance, the weight of it. I'd driven 10 hours to give her a piece of our family, and she'd left me standing outside her door. The shame wasn't mine, but it clung to me anyway, heavy as the box in my arms. I closed the journal, set it back in the box, and lay down, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, but it couldn't drown out Clara's message. Something's not right. What did she mean? My property in Shenandoah, the cabin Walter and I built, where we'd spent summers reading poetry by the fire, where Amelia learned to fish in the creek, was it at risk? The thought made my stomach turn, but I pushed it aside. Not tonight. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. Morning came, gray and quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, the box still open, Rose's books and journals spread out like old friends. I picked up a first edition of Jane Eyre, one of Rose's favorites. She'd written in the margins little notes about courage, about standing tall when the world tried to make you small. I traced her words with my finger, and something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet, but a clarity, like the fog lifting off the Shenandoah hills. Those books, those journals, they weren't just for Amelia. They were mine, too. They were Rose's. They were bigger than one person, bigger than a family that didn't see their worth. I packed the box carefully, tucking the quilt around it like I was protecting a child. As I checked out of the motel, my phone buzzed again. It's an email this time, from the director of a small library in Richmond. I'd worked with them years ago, back when I was still teaching, helping catalog rare books for their archives. The email was polite, formal, but the words caught my attention. We've heard you have a remarkable collection of early 20th century women's writings. We're curating an exhibit on women's voices from that era. Would you consider sharing your family's artifacts? I read it twice, my coffee growing, cold in my hand. Share Rose's journals. The thought felt too big, too raw. Those books were my history, my grandmother's heart on paper. I'd always planned to pass them to Amelia, to keep them in the family. But what was family? If family could close a door on you without a word? I didn't reply. Not yet. But the idea lingered, like a seed planted in soft earth. Driving back to Virginia, the highway stretched long and empty. My mind kept circling back to Amelia, to Lucas, to the way they'd stood in that doorway, their smiles thin as paper. I thought of Walter, too, my husband, gone 5 years now, but still so present in the quiet moments. He'd loved those journals as much as I did. He'd sit with me on the porch of our Shenandoah cabin, reading Rose's words aloud, his voice warm and steady. She was a force, your grandmother, he'd say, just like you. I hadn't felt like a force in a long time. I'd been a mother, a widow, a woman who cooked dinners Amelia didn't show up for, who sent birthday cards that went unanswered. I'd poured so much of myself into her, into the life we'd built, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own. But sitting in that car, with Rose's box beside me, I felt something stir, spark. A memory of who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's safety net. When I got home, the house was quiet. It's too quiet the way it always was since Walter passed. I set the box on the kitchen table and made tea, the same kind Rose used to brew chamomile with a hint of honey. As I sipped it, I opened the email. Again, the library's director had included a handwritten note at the bottom, scanned and attached. Your family's story deserves to be heard, Dottie. Not just by your daughter, but by the world. My heart skipped. How did she know about Amelia, about the journals? I hadn't told anyone outside of Clara. The note felt like a sign, like Rose herself was whispering across the years. I didn't call the library back right away. I sat there, the tea warming my hands, and let the idea settle. Maybe these journals weren't meant to stay locked in a box, waiting for someone who didn't want them. Maybe they were meant to live, to breathe, to remind others like me that our stories don't end when someone stops listening. And then there was Clara's message, still unanswered on my phone. Something's not right. I looked at the box, at Rose's words, at the life I'd thought I was building for Amelia. And I knew deep in my bones that whatever was coming next wasn't just about hurt. It was about truth. And I was ready. To face it, the Virginia air was crisp when I pulled into my driveway, the kind of morning that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. My little house sat quiet, its white paint peeling at the edges, the porch swings still where Walter. And I used to sit, carried Rose's box inside, setting it on the kitchen table like it was the only thing grounding me. Clara's message, "Something's not right," kept circling in my head, sharp and insistent. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a splinter under my skin. I couldn't ignore it. I poured another cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling up like a memory. The house felt emptier than usual, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I'd always loved this place, our home, where Walter and I raised Amelia, where we laughed over burnt casseroles and read poetry by the fire. But now it felt like a museum of things I'd lost. Walter, 5 years gone. Amelia, drifting further every day. And maybe, I thought, a piece of myself? I opened the safe in the back of the hall closet. The one Walter insisted we buy after we sold our first plot of land. It wasn't fancy, just sturdy, the kind you trust more than a bank. My fingers fumbled. With the combination our anniversary, always, but it clicked open. Inside were manila folders, some yellowed, some crisp. Deeds, tax records, old letters. I was looking for something, anything, to explain Clara's warning. And then I saw it, a folder labeled Shenandoah Property. My heart stopped. The Shenandoah Cabin, our refuge, where Walter and I spent summers watching fireflies. Where Amelia caught her first fish, where I'd read Rose's journals aloud under the stars. I opened the folder, my hands steady, but my breath uneven. There. It was a deed transfer, dated 6 months ago. The cabin, our cabin, had been moved to an LLC called Amelia Lucas Ventures. My name was on the document, my signature scrawled at the bottom. Except I hadn't signed it, not once, not ever. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair, the folder open in front of me. My signature, Dottie Sullivan, stared back, precise, familiar, but not mine. Someone had forged it. I read the date again, April. I'd been in Richmond then, helping Amelia plan her wedding, picking out tablecloths while she laughed about centerpieces. Had she known? Had Lucas? The thought made my stomach churn, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, the tea gone cold, the folder heavier than Rose's box. I called Evelyn, our family lawyer. Now, she'd known Walter and me since we were young, back when we bought the cabin with my inheritance. Her voice was calm, steady, the way it always was. "Bring the papers, Dottie," she said. "We'll figure this out." I drove to her office that afternoon, the folder tucked under my arm like evidence. Evelyn's office was small, cluttered, with books and framed degrees, but it felt safe. She read the documents in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp. This isn't just a mistake, she said. The LLC was set up to use the cabin as collateral for a business loan. A big one. A loan. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. For a real estate project in Baltimore. A paperwork lists Lucas as the primary manager. Amelia's name is nowhere on it. I leaned back, my mind racing. Lucas, not Amelia. Had she been kept in the dark? Or was she part of it, playing innocent, while Lucas pulled the strings? I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the uncertainty. Evelyn promised to dig deeper, to check the LLC filings to see if my name had been used elsewhere. Don't confront them yet, she said. Let me get the facts. I drove home, the Shenandoah Hills blurring past my window. My hands gripped the wheel, but my mind was back at the cabin. Walter and I had painted the shutters blue one summer, laughing when the paint dripped on our shoes. Amelia had run through the grass, chasing fireflies, calling out to us. That place was ours. It was mine, and someone had taken it, used it, gambled it like it was nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the attic, where I kept Walter's things, his old sweaters, his books. A box of letters he'd written me when we were young. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. A small envelope tucked inside a poetry collection. His handwriting, neat and familiar, spelled out Dottie. My heart caught. I hadn't seen this before. I slid my finger under the seal, careful, like it might break. Inside was a single page dated 2 months before Walter passed. Dottie, he wrote, the cabin is yours. Always. I've put it in a trust just for you. No one can touch it, not Amelia, not anyone. Seen how people change when money's involved. Protect what we built. You're stronger than you know. I read it again, my eyes burning. A trust. Walter had known somehow that this might happen. He'd protected me, even when I didn't know I needed it. The cabin wasn't theirs. It never had been. The LLC, the loan, the forged signature was all a lie. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and let the tears come. Not for Amelia, not for Lucas, but for Walter. For the man who saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. The next morning, I called Evelyn. My voice didn't shake. I found something, I said. Walter left a trust. The cabin's mine. She asked me to bring the letter, her tone sharp with purpose. As I hung up, I looked at Rose's box on the table. Her journals, her books, her words, they'd carried me through that night. And now Walter's letter was carrying me forward. But there was something else. A question I couldn't shake. If Lucas had done this alone, what did Amelia know? Was she complicit, or was she caught in his web too? Walter's letter had one more line tucked at the bottom, almost an afterthought. Don't trust everything. Our girl says, but protect her if she needs it. I stared at those words, my heart heavy but clear. The truth was coming, whether I was ready or not. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it. The morning after I found Walter's letter, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger, though it could have been. Wasn't sadness, though that lingered too. It was something else, something solid, like the oak floorboards in our old Shenandoah cabin. I had a foundation now, a place to stand. I called Evelyn and told her about the trust. Her voice crackled with focus over the phone. This changes everything, Dottie, she said. Bring me the letter. We'll move fast. I drove to her office that afternoon, Walter's letter tucked carefully in my purse. Evelyn read it in silence, her glasses perched low on her nose. When she finished, she looked up, her eyes sharp but warm. This trust is airtight, she said. The cabin's yours, legally. The LLC, it's built on sand. We can file to freeze their assets and challenge the transfer. But Dottie, this means confronting Amelia and Lucas. Are you ready for that? I nodded, though my heart was heavy. Ready didn't mean eager. Ready meant necessary. I'd spent years cooking dinners Amelia didn't show for, sending checks for their first house, believing in her dreams. I'd trusted her. I'd trusted them both. But trust, I was learning, could be a one-way street. And I was done standing at the end of it, waiting. Evelyn worked quickly. By the end of the week, she'd filed a petition to void the fraudulent deed transfer and freeze the assets of Amelia Lucas Ventures. She found more emails, bank records, a paper trail showing Lucas had used the cabin as collateral for a $200,000 loan tied to some shaky real estate deal in Baltimore. My name was nowhere on the loan, but my forged signature was everywhere. Evelyn told me to wait to let the legal process unfold. But I couldn't, not completely. I needed to look them in the eye. I needed to say what had been unsaid for too long. I called Amelia and asked to come for dinner. Her voice was hesitant, but she agreed. Just family, I said, echoing the words she'd used when she planned her rehearsal dinner without me. I drove back to Maryland, the 10-hour stretch feeling shorter this time. Like the road itself knew I wasn't the same woman who'd driven it before. The wooden box stayed home, locked in the safe with Walter's letter. This wasn't about Rose's journals anymore. This was about me. Their house was just as I remembered, too big, too cold, all glass and sharp edges. Amelia opened the door, her smile tight, like she was bracing for something. Lucas stood behind her, his hands in his pockets, his eyes avoiding. "Mine, Mom," Amelia said, stepping aside. "Come in." No hug, no warmth. Just those words, careful and clipped. Dinner was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that hums with things unsaid. Amelia served roasted chicken, the kind I used to make for her birthdays. Lucas poured wine, his movements stiff. I ate slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I set my fork down, folded my hands, and looked at them both. "I found something," I said, my voice steady. "The deed to the Shenandoah cabin. It's in an LLC now. My signature's on it. But I didn't sign anything." Amelia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. "Mom," Amelia said, her voice small, "what are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on her. "The cabin, the one your father and I built. Been used as collateral for a loan, a big one. And my name's been forged." Lucas leaned back, his chair creaking. "It's a misunderstanding," he said, too quickly. "We were protecting the family's interests. You don't use the cabin anymore, Dottie, we thought. You thought?" I cut in, my voice still calm but sharp now, like a blade hidden in silk. "You thought you could take what wasn't yours? Without asking?" Without a word. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. Lucas handled the paperwork. "I thought it was just business." Lucas opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I've removed you both from my will," I said. "From the trust, the accounts, everything. And I'm giving you 60 days to move out of the house I helped you buy. This isn't about anger. It's about boundaries. It's about what I'm worth." The room went still. Amelia stared at me, her face pale. Lucas looked at the table, his hands clenched. Neither spoke. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the door. "Thank you for dinner," I said. And then I left. I drove to the Shenandoah cabin that night. The road was dark, the hills rising like old friends. When I unlocked the door, the air smelled of pine and memory. I lit a fire in the stone hearth, the same one Walter and I had built with our own hands. The flames crackled, warm and alive. I sat there for hours watching them dance, feeling Walter's presence in the quiet. The cabin was mine again, not just on paper, but in my bones. The next morning, I walked to the creek behind the house, where Amelia used to splash and laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I wrote a letter to her, one I didn't plan to send. "Amelia," I wrote, "I love you. I always will. But love doesn't mean letting you erase me. I hope you find the truth, whatever it is, and I hope you find yourself." I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket. As I stood by the creek, the water cold and clear, my phone buzzed. A text from Amelia. "Mom, I need to talk. Just me, please." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Was she telling the truth? Had Lucas acted alone? Or was this another layer of the lie? Didn't know. But for the first time, I didn't need to know. The cabin, the fire, Walter's letter, they'd reminded me who I was. And that was enough. The Shenandoah cabin held me that night, its quiet wrapping around me like one of Walter's old flannel shirts. I woke to the sound of birds outside, their calls sharp against the morning stillness. The fire had died to embers, but the warmth lingered. So did Amelia's text. "Mom, I need to talk. Just me, please." I read it again, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to call her right then, to hear her voice, to believe she hadn't known about Lucas's betrayal. But another part, the part that had found Walter's letter, that had stood up at that dinner table, knew I didn't need her answers to keep going. I'd spent too long waiting for her to see me. Now I was seeing myself. I drove back to Virginia, the cabin fading in my rearview mirror, but not in my heart. The house felt different when I walked in, not empty, not anymore. It was mine, not just a place where I'd waited for Amelia to visit or Walter to come home. I set Rose's box on the kitchen table next to the letter I'd written but hadn't sent. I didn't need to send it. Kate writing it had been enough. A way to let go of the hurt without letting go of the love. That week, I called the Richmond Library. The director, Sarah, answered on the first ring, her voice warm, like we'd been friends for years. I told her about Rose's journals, the books, the stories woven through their pages. "They're not just mine," I said. "They belong to anyone who's ever felt forgotten." She didn't rush me, just listened. When I finished, she said, "Dottie, we'd be honored to have them. And if you ever want to share their story in person, we'd love to have you." I hung up, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The idea of Rose's words living beyond me, beyond Amelia, felt right. It felt like a beginning. I started, sorting through the journals, choosing which ones to donate, which ones to keep. Each page was a reminder of Rose's strength, of the way she'd carried her family through hard times. I wasn't just passing on books. I was passing on her courage. A few days later, I found myself at the library. Not to drop off the journals, but to meet with Sarah and a small group of volunteers. They were older women, like me, with lines around their eyes and stories in their silences. One of them, Helen, sat across from me, her hands folded tight. She told me about her son who'd sold her family's farm without telling her, leaving her with nothing but a rented apartment and a stack of unpaid bills. "I thought I'd failed him," she said, her voice breaking. "But maybe he failed me." I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. Enough to let her know she wasn't alone. That day, an idea took root. I'd spent years giving pieces of myself to Amelia, to Lucas, to a family that didn't see me. What if I gave those pieces to women, like Helen? Women who'd been erased, pushed aside, but were still here, still fighting to be seen. That's how the Rose Foundation was born. Named for my grandmother, it was a place for women over 60, women who'd been hurt by the families they'd built, who'd lost homes, savings, or just their voice. We started small, in a rented room at the library, with folding chairs and a coffee pot I borrowed from church. The first workshop had 7 women. Some came with notebooks, some with nothing. But their stories. Helen was there, her hands less shaky now. She talked about her farm, about the apple trees she'd planted with her husband, about the son who'd sold it all. Another woman, Ruth, spoke about her daughter who'd taken her retirement savings for a business venture that never materialized. I didn't stand at the front like a teacher. I sat with them at eye level. I shared just enough of my story, the 10-hour drive, the closed door, the forged signature. Not to make them feel sorry for me, but to show them I was. One of them, by the end, Helen reached for my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making me feel like I'm still here." Word spread, the workshops grew. Women came with letters, with tears, with stories they'd never told anyone. I listened. I learned and I healed. The Rose Foundation wasn't just about helping them, it was saving me too. It was proof that my life didn't end when Amelia shut that door. Then came an invitation. A local community group was hosting a Women's Voices night at the town theater. They'd heard about the foundation, about Rose's journals, about me. Would you speak? They asked. I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker, not like the professors I'd known in my teaching days. But Sarah was there when I wavered, her voice steady. Dottie, your story matters, not just to you, to all of us. I said yes. The night of the event, I wore a navy dress Walter always loved. The one he said brought out the blue in my eyes. I didn't read from notes, stood on that stage and spoke from my ribs about Rose, about the cabin, about the moment I realized my daughter saw me as a means to an end. But mostly, I talked about what came after. The women, the foundation, the way a life can break and still grow back stronger. When I stepped off the stage, the applause was soft, steady, like rain on a tin roof. I didn't need it to feel whole. I already did. A week later, Amelia called. Her voice was different, shaky, raw. She said, I left Lucas. I found out what he did. Not just to you, to me, too. Can we meet? Just us. I agreed. But not because I needed her to fix me. We met at a quiet cafe, her face pale, her hands twisting a napkin. She told me Lucas had lied to her, used her name in the LLC, kept her in the dark. She showed me a journal she'd found in his things, one of Rose's, one I'd never seen. I didn't know, she said, her eyes wet. I'm so sorry. I looked at her, my daughter, and saw the girl who'd once called those journals treasure. I didn't forgive her that day. I didn't need to. I just listened. And for the first time, I knew my healing didn't depend on her. I sat across from Amelia in that quiet cafe. The journal she'd brought resting between us like an unspoken question. It was one of Rose's, its pages brittle, its ink faded, but alive. I didn't open it right away. I just looked at my daughter, her eyes red, her hands still twisting that napkin. She'd said she was sorry that Lucas had lied to her too. I believed her, not because I wanted to, but because I saw the girl who once loved Rose's stories, the girl who'd called them treasure. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I just nodded, and we sat in a silence that wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, like the air before dawn. When I got home, I opened the journal. Rose's words spilled out, different from her others. These were about forgiveness, about a sister who'd betrayed her, taken her share of their family's land, and left her with nothing but pride. Forgiving isn't forgetting, Rose wrote. It's choosing to carry your own light. I read it twice, my chest tight, but not with pain. Rose had known what it meant to be hurt by family, and she'd known how to keep going. That night, I decided to keep the door to Amelia open, just a crack, not because I needed her, but because I loved her. And love, I was learning, could exist without losing myself. The Rose Foundation grew, its roots spreading deeper than I'd imagined. Women came to our workshops with stories that broke my heart and built it back stronger. Helen brought a photo of her old farm, her smile, shy but real. Ruth showed up with a paid-off bill, her hands steady for the first time. They weren't just healing, they were rewriting their stories. And so was I. Letters arrived, some handwritten, some slipped under the library door. You made me feel seen. One read. I thought I'd disappeared. I kept them in a box under my bed, next to Rose's journals and Walter's letter. One Sunday, I drove to Walter's grave. The air was cool, the Shenandoah Hills turning gold with autumn. I placed a slim book of poetry, his favorite, Frost and the Grass. You were right, I whispered. I'm stronger than I knew. I stood there, eyes closed, letting go. Of the years I'd spent begging to be seen, the dinners I'd cooked for an empty table, the hurt I'd carried like a second skin. Letting go wasn't freedom, not at first. It was grief, walking itself home. But standing there, I was just Dottie. A woman with lines around her eyes, stories in her bones, and a quiet victory in her heart. The Rose Foundation was my legacy. Now, not in a vault, not in a deed, but in the women who walked a little taller, who found their voices again. I'd thought legacy was what I left for Amelia. I was wrong. Legacy is what you leave in others. If you've ever felt pushed out of your own story, like your worth was tied to someone else's approval, pause here. What would it look like to reclaim your light without asking permission? Share your thoughts below. Someone might need your words tonight, and the lesson. You don't need to win a fight to find peace. You just need to choose yourself again and again until the world remembers who you are.